When you think about money, do you feel like it's a math problem to solve or perhaps a story we're trying to live? Welcome back to the You Potential Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Maslick. If you've been enjoying these conversations, please hit the subscribe button. It really helps support the show and spread the word. Today's conversation is about something that we don't always give ourselves permission to explore. The question is, what if money isn't the main story in our lives, but something that serves our story? I sit down with Carl Richards, financial planner, author, creator of those famous Sharpie sketches that cut straight through the noise. He's written books like The Behavior Gap, The One-Page Financial Plan, and now this new book, Your Money. And through it all, his mission really has stayed the same, to spark meaningful conversations. And those conversations aren't just about spreadsheets. They're really about self-authorship, about living a life that's guided by your own values, not someone else's expectations, and then letting your money decisions align with that story. Carl brings this incredible blend of curiosity, clarity, and even a little mischief. And he invites us to see money not as something to master, but something to work with in the service of a good life. We talk about uncertainty, not as something to eliminate, but something to embrace. We also explore how to raise principled and curious kids in a world full of noise. And one of the more powerful moments was when we talked about doing the work, the internal work, often invisible work, to live a life that actually feels like your own. Another part of the conversation that really felt good to me was when we talked about the range of outcomes. Carl often uses this phrase, range of outcomes, in investing, that the future isn't a straight line, it's a spectrum of opportunities. But what happens if we apply that same idea to life? It opens up possibility, presence, a sense of freedom, even in the mess. So if you've ever felt like money has taken the wheel and you want to be the one driving in your money story, this one's for you. I hope you enjoy this fascinating conversation with Carl Richards. Carl, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sean. I'm super excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have a conversation with you as well. Carl, as many people who have been in this financial advice, financial planning industry, we have read your books. And it started with The Behavior Gap. I know for myself, when I first picked up that book, I didn't know the language that I was seeking to understand, but your book really articulated it well with the behavior gap. And I was always curious in this gap, and you did such a good job identifying it. I want to go back to that time right now, though, when I think at early 2010s, you're this advisor with trying to articulate a conversation with a client. You decide to grab a Sharpie and draw a sketch to articulate your point.
Yep.
With all this hindsight, all these years later, if Carl of today could go back to that Carl back then who decided to pick up that Sharpie, unbeknownst to you, created this movement where sketches are becoming more and more popular as a way to articulate, whether it's advice or conversations. People are using Sharpies because of you. What would you say to that younger version of Carl?
Well, gosh, that's such a nice question. And I love the way you frame that. Like, I didn't even know the concept I was trying to articulate. Like, we all have this sort of like that. And that, by the way, just a slight deviation, like that's my favorite creative. It's like kind of what I built my career around now, is the idea of like, there's kind of this unspoken thing that sort of seems to be annoying. Sometimes I compare it to a sliver just beneath the skin that you didn't know was there. You're sort of like, and I think like this, and I will absolutely get to your question, but the current book is another example of that idea of like, gosh, we're still kind of missing the mark. Like, we've sort of lost the plot about what this thing called money is really about. And it's resulted in all these problems. And we seem to be like, most of our solutions are hacking at the branches of the tree, like get a better budgeting app, like, and I often joke that like a lot of the progress we've made in the financial technology world is about sort of, getting a new way of cutting your own fingers off, like, but it's beautiful and it's fast. So I love that idea of like still working for something that you're not sure even the problem yet. You're just trying to put framework around it. So thanks for that. If I had to go back, I think I would say, I think, I've thought about this a lot actually. I think I would say relax, right? Like it's going to all, like you can have this relax, because you can have the same impact. You can be just as ambitious, if you will. You can be just as hardworking without all the fear of failure, the concern, the worrying that there's a lion in every bush, which reveals a lot about me in terms of my own relationship with money. It was like the failure was always around the next corner. So maybe do the same things, but without all that fear. That's probably what I'd say.
Well, thank you for that. This idea that you have, you're saying here, the sliver under the finger really speaks to me. And just, we need people like you who start to be curious, to look, not just or to be able to notice that, hey, there is something here, and not just innovate the best new technology that's, like you're saying, hacking the branches at the top. And it seems like a lot of your career, your journey, has been around being curious over that sliver that you speak of. And I even look at your work, like you started out with these sketches with the behavior gap, really focused on a new way, I think, really a new way of looking at our financial planning. We're still looking at behaviors though. How can we invest better? How can we make smarter investment decisions? Not just investment, but behaviors. And as the years gone on, I know you co-authored a book around freedom, and this book just seems more around a meaningful life, deeper conversations that go beyond, transcend just behaviors in of themselves. If you could look back at your journey, how, if anything at all, has this shift occurred?
Yeah. It's such an interesting question. I think that, like, I think the key to that is this word you used a couple times, like curiosity. And I'm just lucky in the sense that the problems that I was bumping into and wanted to solve for myself turned out to be problems that other people were interested in as well. Like I just, it could have been that I was interested in something that nobody wanted to talk about, or it could have been that I was and I often wondered this actually, it could have been I was the only one with the problem. So I find myself asking all the time, and I'm doing it right now still, like all the time, is like, am I the crazy one? And sometimes the answer is yes. Like, you know what? That's just, you're just drinking your own Kool-Aid. Like, but I've been lucky in the sense that if I'm bumping up against a problem repeatedly, I kind of now automatically assume that there must be other people that would be interested. And then the second thing I have to assume, the second thing that happened that I got lucky is there's now tools for that idea to spread. Like if this was even 25, or if we were like, if I had started 50 years ago, it might have been more difficult. Like if I had started trying to simplify complex things with a Sharpie on cardstock, and the only people were my local neighbors, they probably would have been like, uninterested and told me it was a bad idea. So the ability to spread. And then the third thing is that, people are interested in, because I think of my work much more as an adventure journal than I do as a self-help book. And so it's again, I've been really lucky that people are interested in this adventure. This adventure is something, how to have a meaningful life, how to make sense of money's role in that life, the absurdity of money being the main character, money and work being the main, like, how did that happen? That's so fascinating to me that life in America think of like life in, at least in America, is organized around money and work. Like you fit everything else in. I'll fit the kids in. I'll fit my hobbies in. I'll fit my health in. I'll fit sleep in. Like I'll get sleep later. It's money is the organizing principle of our lives in America, probably in many parts of the world. But I've been in parts of the world where that's not true. And I was like, oh, that, when I first saw that, I remember thinking, is that allowed? Wait, like money's not the center of their lives. That's crazy. And then it's also interesting that even your audience could be like, money not the center, because there's this thing that happens with adults where we're like, of course I don't keep up with the Joneses. I mean, come on. Like when it's stated so obvious, we're like, peer pressures for kids. Adults call it research. So I think I just got lucky in that sense of like, this adventure is something that we all have to run up against. Culture has made it even more interesting because, you know, we've got the mimetic, the copying, the machine now called Instagram. So I think that's really what happened here is I got really lucky that my curiosity happened to line up with a bunch of other people's curiosity, and the tools exist to share that.
Carl, there's like 4 different doors I'd like to go down there, but I can't help hear this one here. You said lucky a few times.
Sure.
And I think about luck differently after reading Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers book, where he talks about jobs just happened to be at this university where there was a computer at the right time. But he decided to be curious and work on the computers, etc. So he got all his hours. Do you actually think you were lucky? Or do you
thought a lot about this.
Okay.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this. So I think of course, I'm fine with acknowledging that and I can't remember who coined the phrase luck surface area, right? I'm fine with the idea. I'll take credit for the idea that I increased my luck surface area. I'll take credit for the idea that I did things that some other people might find hard, like speaking in public, doing work in public. It's hard for me, but it's not as hard as it is for other people. So that must be hard work. Okay, I've done that. But the fact that it's not as hard for me as it might be for other people is luck. The fact that an editor at the New York Times opened one of the 300 emails he got that day, and he normally deletes all of them, is that there was lucky breaks that are just flat out. What I mean by that is I can't take any credit for them outside of increasing the luck surface area. And then it's like all the hard work, all the stuff. And then there was some stuff on top that I'm just like, it's not necessarily the only thing that I can offer to anyone that's replicatable is the curiosity and the play and traffic part. Like do the work in public, because there are plenty of people who do just as interesting work that haven't had those things happen. You know, I've got author friends that have sold books in the 0.001% number of books, like 500,000 copies, 1 million copies, whatever those numbers are. And their writing is great, but they'll acknowledge like there are other people who are better writers, so there's some stuff on top that happens that I am totally okay with being like, I guess we actually have a principle around here. Our entire approach to marketing is openness to magic. That's our marketing strategy. Openness to magic, right? And I don't know how to control it, how to define it. I just know I'm going to do the work and then see what happens.
Your openness to magic makes me think, I'm just pulling up here in your new book, the range of outcomes. I like how you talk about in the book, your money, range of outcomes can vary. Like your sketch is just squiggled all over.
Yeah.
As I was reading that one, it made me think about the range of outcomes in life. And I like this idea, open to magic.
Yeah.
How has this principle, understanding that if we have to detach from our desired outcomes or having a range of outcomes or this magic that could come about, how has that influenced you in creating a meaningful life?
Yeah, Sean, I mean, geez, these are such good questions. I could do this all day. because again, this is something I've thought a lot about, because there's a juvenile version of the law of attraction that's really problematic, you know, and I really honestly feel like it was embodied by that book, The Secret. And I know that causes all sorts of email. That's fine. Send the emails. And the reason that book was so dangerous is because it's pointing to a correct and true principle. Like the law of attraction is a real thing. Being focused on what you have, and sometimes we wrap that in this term abundance, opens up different possibilities in your life than it does when you're focused on, and there's another sketch in the book about this, when you're focused inward and scarcity and you're always thinking fear, you actually live in a different reality. Like that's what's fascinating. Like think of your friend who is watching, we don't need to get political. Think of your friend who's watching a certain segment of news that's completely different from the news you watch. You actually you live in different reality. And so I think if you're thinking like abundantly and open and grateful and gratitude for what you have, you live in a different reality. So I think the law of attraction is a principle that's really important. But the juvenile version of that gives us this idea that if we just really focus on it, if we just really think about it, if we write it down on a piece of paper, it will happen. And what I was trying to get at range of outcomes is there's still, and I heard this phrase the other day, I loved it. The possibility of any event occurring in your life is still a random draw with probabilities assigned. You know, so, and you might be able to impact those probabilities. So let's say there's a 50-50 chance of something happening. Maybe you can move it to 52, or maybe you can move it to 55. I don't know what the number is, but yes, you can impact it, but it's still a random draw as to what that. So I think this role of luck, magic, intentionality, hard work, like I think the boundary conditions between those they're really fuzzy. And I love the idea of just thinking like, okay, what if I just show up? I focus on being abundant. I really work hard at getting rid of fear, because fear is never useful. I mean, sorry, fear could be useful with a lion, but fear is not often useful in other areas of our lives. I think that, and then I can embrace the beauty of the range of outcomes, and I can embrace the uncertainty of it. Like here's a good example, Sean. I don't go to the movies. I don't know anybody who goes to the movies because they know exactly the plot, right? You don't go to a art museum because you know what you're going to feel. I don't go into the high mountains here where I live and, climb and ski in avalanche terrain because I know what's going to happen. I go precisely because I don't know what's going to happen. Even though I have a detailed plan, I know it won't go according to the plan. And that range of outcomes is what gives life this meaning. And so instead of being scared, and it is scary, uncertainty can be a bit scary, but instead of being scared of it, I would rather work to be resilient and enjoy it. And because it is reality, it doesn't matter if we're scared of it or not. That range of outcomes is reality. I hope that's not too esoteric.
No, I actually really, really appreciate that. The book, The Secret, also provided me the same feeling that you're describing there. And actually on my previous podcast, I had one of the co-authors on, and he was able to, in hindsight, reflect back that thinking about something and trying to manifest, and that's it, is in a way giving our power away. Whereas I'm hearing you talking about, we got to do the work. Use the word, the work. You got to pick up that Sharpie, so to speak, and then be open to embrace the beauty that comes from it. And that was your quote, embrace the beauty, which I think is so wonderful, is that we got to show up, grab the Sharpie, do the work, and then embrace the beauty that unfolds. And going back to your book, I feel like that's what your book is doing. You're showing up to have these meaningful conversations. I like this idea of 1 million conversations around money, doing the work, And then I think at some point, as you're describing, we have to detach from these outcomes, because that's where maybe frustration could come, is if it doesn't go our way. But maybe there's a just beautiful way down this path. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah.
What have you learned having conversations in around money in the context that you've created in this book have helped you embrace the outcome, knowing that the avalanche might come or it might not come? These unexpected terrains show up. How have these conversations helped you prepare for the unexpected outcomes?
Yeah, I think it's been really helpful from the sense that it's just confirming that this is a universal human condition. The idea that we have these two competing truths we have to hold in our minds at the same time. This is sort of like what it means to be an adult. There are times when you've got to have two competing truths at the same time. Like, I desperately want a plan. I'm deeply attached to my goals, right? This is what I think the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years of my life is going to look like. That's true. We all kind of want that. And the second truth is there's no way that's going to happen, right? It like that. And so what I've learned from these conversations is how universal those truths are, and how universal the tension is, and the tension between those. And what I mean by that is, like, there's no way. Like, if you want an example of this, just go back and look at your calendar and your journal in January and February of 2020. And like, we have friends that like my daughter was just on a trip with somebody who's been doing their summer trip for 30, I think this is like the 38th year. We have friends that have people listening to this probably know, like, every year for 50 years, the family's gone to the lake house. Well, that 2020, you might not have gone to the lake house. Do you know what I mean? Like, every year we take a trip to Europe. You didn't go to Europe that year. And you were planning on it in March. In March, those tickets were booked. They were in your calendar, and boom, you didn't have 3 months of visibility, let alone 3 years or 5 years. And so that's just an extreme example, but I'm not sure it's all that extreme, to be honest. And so I think, does that mean we throw out our plans? No, it means we make plans like a pilot would. You make a flight plan for every trip. And the trip won't go according to the plan. And I think that's what I've learned here in relationship to sort of navigating the uncertainty and the range of outcomes, is that we actually don't want to get rid of that tension. Those two competing truths we want desperately in our bodies and our minds. That's called cognitive dissonance. And your mind doesn't like it because it takes a lot of energy. And your brain, as one of the largest caloric consumers of energy in your body, your brain is like, don't think about all the edges and new cases and gray areas. Just think black and white all the time. And then life shows up in gray or in color, full color, and you're like, oh, and your brain wants to shut that down. That feeling, that tension, we're not trying to resolve that. We're not trying to get rid of it. We're trying to live in it. Because that tension shows up like, do I spend money today with the kids? Or do I save it in case something crazy happens in my old age? Do I embrace adventure or with a trip I want to go on? Or do I deeply embed in my community and feel this deep sense of stability and community? Well, those are values that are in conversation. They're not at war, they're in conversation. And I think that conversation is I think we're too quick to shut it down. And I think living in that tension has been really valuable for me. That's something that's come up in a lot of these conversations.
This idea of living in this tension, earlier you talked about fear. And as you mentioned, it was useful, the human instinct to run away from a tiger as we're getting chased because of the fear kept us alive. But sitting in that tension can be fearful and discomforting, which we might be reactive and try to get out of it. Yeah. But I really like this idea of sitting in it, because that's when I think the most important decisions are made. Yeah. As you're talking about this, it's making me think about some of the work. I'm a fan of positive psychology, and they some of the work talks about is living a self-authored life. And it's really about this internal locus of control. Like,
Love that.
I understand my values. I understand that really I'm the one making my decisions. And as a result, I get to author my life. I can't help but think that these sketches, these conversations give us the practice reps, like reps in the gym of how to sit in that tension. I'm wondering, with all these conversations that you've had with like people, not just like podcasts here, how, if anything at all, have you seen just having conversations help people sit with that tension instead of being the reactive human that we're evolutionary hardwired to be and running from it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you brought up an interesting point that like it can be, and it can be tiring, it can be taxing. And so I think one thing that's been really important to me, and I will do this as soon as we're in between this conversation and the next one, I'll run upstairs, I'll go outside, bare feet, and I'll sit in the garden for 5 minutes and I was not good at that 20 years ago. So I think this idea of sitting in the tension has to involve periods of rest. Like you've got to uncoil the tension. You can't, I don't mean sit in it all the time. I just mean there's times for planning and thinking, and there's times for being present. There's another piece of tension, right? How am I going to plan about the future, and how am I going to be present now? Well, it's not like we perfectly balance those. It's like we calibrate between those. And so I think that idea of learning to, you don't have to be thinking all the time, right? Like, can you just enjoy the lake? Okay, good idea. And so I think that's really important.
You seem like a deep thinker. You seem like you think about this stuff. A while at the same time, but you also talk about rest. You talk about going into the garden. You talk about enjoying the lake. You're not constantly just, I don't know you personally beyond this conversation, but from what I gather, it seems like you're learning how to do both.
Yeah.
If your kids were able to be here, what would they say that dad has learned about having a meaningful life in terms of balancing this tension between, I liked how you said save or spending some money today on meaningful things versus saving for that future version?
Yeah. Yeah. We've had some of these conversations lately. All my kids are older, so 20 to 28. And one of them came home recently, actually, she's at university in California. She came home and we were on a bike ride, and she said, we were up high on this ridge that I can see from the house, taking us, an hour and a half to get up there on our bikes. And it's this beautiful sort of expansive place. And she said, hey, help me understand financially, help me understand. Because we're like one of the wealthiest people I know. We're like the wealthiest family I know. And I felt this reaction of like, are you out of your mind? Like I know people who are airplane rich, like we're barely making the mortgage. Like I felt that reaction. And I might've even, in fact, I did. She told me 2 weeks later when we talked about it, she said that I did say something. I said something like, no, we're not. What about these people and these people and these people? But luckily we got through that reactive stage. And I said, tell me more about what you mean by that word wealthy. And she said, well, what I mean by it is we really do. We've lived the lives we want to. We really do what we want, which I thought was like, okay, now I'm down for that. But we had this conversation 2 weeks later when I went to visit her in California, where she asked specifically, like, what was your income last year? And I was like, wow, you have been reading some of my work. Because I was like, I don't know if but I told her, and she was like, and so we had this long conversation about, to your question, the answer would be, that I think they would be really clear that my wife and I were not taught how to do this. Like nobody had these conversations with us. And it's not our parents' fault either, because nobody had them with them. And the generation they grew up in is just wasn't, money, sex, politics, and religion. We don't talk about it. But that's all changing. And I don't think it was healthy in the first place. And it's more a requirement now. And so I think they would say, like, man, my dad was super clumsy about this 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I think they would say, like, I always felt nervous to get something at the grocery store. I was always a little bit worried on vacation. I think they would say that there was tension or anxiety around the spending on the vacation. And I say that like, that's exactly probably how I sounded back then. Uh-huh. And I think they would say now, like, we're starting to still be clumsy, but figure it out. Like, we're having conversations about it. We're open about it. So I think they would see, if there's anything I hope my kids took from me, it was the ability to be wrong a lot and keep coming back and apologizing. Right. And working through it. So I've taught my kids how to be really good at apologizing because I've gotten lots of reps. So I hope that's what they would say. And that money is just a tool, and just a tool. And if you want more of the tool, there's no problem. Just make sure that it's the reason you want more of the tool is because it's a tool to do a thing. This is the last thing I'll say about this.
No, don't be sorry.
No, I hope they would say, because I'm making the claim, nobody wants more money. They want more of what they think money will give them. Sometimes money's helpful in that, and sometimes it's just a distraction.
Carl, you gave me goosebumps with that answer. As a father, I just appreciate, the humility to say that, hey, I was wrong. I'm stumbling my way through this. And also as a public figure like yourself, I think it's often easy to be like, I got all this figured out, and then underneath the waterline, you get off the call, you're like, what? That wasn't true. I just appreciate what I feel is, raw, authentic conversations, because people look up to you. And and I say this because I hear a lot, people can talk about their Instagram worthy lives only. And you talked about being a human here. So thank you very much.
That means a lot. Thank you.
Carl, thank you for this conversation. My final question is, let's imagine you're at end of life. Doesn't matter how old you are. You're at end of life. You're sitting on a porch, looking out, perhaps at that mountain crest you talked about, but anywhere that brings you complete peace, ease, and contentment. You decide to bring out a notebook and perhaps a Sharpie to draw one more meaningful sketch that you're going to give to your kids on what you learned was a key to live a meaningful life. What would that sketch be, or what would it represent?
There's a lot of things that come to mind, and I'm kind of fighting one back, and I think it's probably the right one. I believe in living my life full on, right? Like full gas. And now I've gotten older, I realize, like, with periods of rest, but I don't have, I want to surround myself with people who are up to something. I almost want to trademark that. I'm not going to, it's just a joke, but like fire in their eyes, slightly mischievous. I can actually recognize them when I walk in a room now because I practice this. I'm going to be in lots of rooms with lots of people over the next 3 months. And I intentionally walk in the room and I'm like, where are my people? Where are the people who are up to something? We have this friend named Jillian, and when she shows up, she's a past Olympic mogul skier. And if you know anything about mogul skiers, I mean, these people have got to be like crazy, and tough as nails. And when every time I see her, she's got fire in her eyes. And that doesn't mean hustle. Like, I used to think that meant hustle. It doesn't. It could mean sitting on the porch. It could mean, like I'm for the first time in my life, I'm excited about the idea of getting into fly fishing, because previously I was like, there's not enough adrenaline. So it doesn't mean adrenaline. It just means, like, what are you up to? In fact, some of the older people that I love the most still have that, it's not a twinkle. It's a it's a spark, and that's what I think. And so I think like, I really do wish there was, I'll tell you a quick story about this. I had an interview on my 50 Fires podcast with the guy that created all the Yeti films, all the like lifestyle Yeti films, like the Yeti coolers. So they go like, they don't do product placement with them. They go do, fly fishing guides and whatever. And he told me that he's a very creative guy, peak experience, loves to do things, is always getting after it. And he said he got a job at an insurance company at a university. And he said he couldn't stay. He's like, I wish I could have. I couldn't stay. I just couldn't. He's like, put his head down. He's like, I just couldn't wear the khaki pants. And I was like, hey, are there some days you wish you could have? He put his head down again and said, Carl, every day. And what that points to is like, I wish I could just not have to have that passion and energy. I kind of wish I could. I kind of wish I could just go to the office, punch, there's nothing wrong with that life, by the way. I wish. Yeah. And my friends who are that way, I'm always asking them, and they're always asking me about my life. So we always want the other thing. So I think that's what that sketch would be. It'd be a circle. And this is something my friend Rob showed me, this kind of idea as a visual. It'd be a circle, and the circle would be labeled the world. And there would be a giant exclamation mark outside the circle, and it would be labeled your life. And there would be an arrow from the circle, from the exclamation mark to the center of the world. So like forcibly insert that opinion into the world, whether you're a doctor, whether you're and if you can just wear the khaki pants, great. But if this resonates with you, of like, I want a life of purpose and meaning, I want to be up to something, I want to be slightly mischievous, like they're kind of always causing trouble. Like that's what I hope my kids would take away. Like, do your thing, whatever your thing is, like do your thing. And I don't know where the boundary condition between that is and like follow your passion and some of the dangerous advice. But all I know is that's what I would draw at the end of my life.
Oh, Carl, that again, 2 goosebumps on this one. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I say this because my son is a little mischievous, and I love it.
Foster that.
I love it, but yet it challenges me as a father. He's 9 years old, and you're like, why? But yet, to your words, foster.
Don't.
So that,
like, I think of those people. I think of those kids, and I have all of my kids are a little bit that way. But I have one daughter who was always causing a ruckus. She fired her own piano teacher. Like, she hated piano, and one day on Thursday, I was like, it's Thursday at 6. Where's the piano teacher? So I asked her, I'm like, hey, where's the piano teacher? She said she won't be coming back. She was 11. I'm like, what do you mean she won't be coming back? She's like, I fired her. And I'm like, you know what? Fair enough. I think of them as wild stallions. Like, and I didn't do a great job, but like, man, don't crush that.
Yeah.
So anyway, good luck with that.
Thank you so much, Carl. Thank you for this conversation. It was really personally meaningful to me. I know the listeners will appreciate this. Your book, Your Money, is out October 20 this fall.
October, and available for pre-order now everywhere where you buy books.
Okay, well, we will include all of that in the show notes. Anywhere else you'd like to point listeners to find information about Carl Richards?
Yeah, we're doing some super fun stuff with the book that will be out in September. Like, if we can pull it off, it'll be the first book you can have a conversation like this with the book. So that will be released at behaviorgap.com. So if you just sort of follow along there, we'll certainly be announcing it to our newsletter list, but we're creating a tool. If we can pull it off, it'll be really, really fun. So that'll be out in September. So behaviorgap.com is the best place.
Okay, wonderful. I look forward to that. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Cheers, Sean. Thank you.
That's it for today's episode of the You Potential podcast, where the goal is to explore what it truly means to live a life well lived. And I think we did that. Today's conversation with Carl, it really reminded me of just how powerful conversations can be. You know, we live in this world that's increasingly shaped and often distorted by technology. I mean, everywhere we look, people are texting, scrolling, searching for these quick sound bites. It's efficient, I understand that. But today's conversation reminded me of how this quickness can really rob us from the depth and the richness that comes through truly connecting in a conversation. These deep, meaningful conversations really have the power to move us. And I felt that today with Carl. They have the ability to shift us from simply knowing something, like at the cognitive level, to really becoming something. They spark insights, stretch our ways of thinking, and let us explore ideas in ways that really, they change us. I'm sure you've had these conversations, because I know whenever I do, I feel them. And ancient wisdom traditions knew this. Socrates believed that dialogue was the path to self-knowledge and wisdom. Confucius taught us that conversations build virtue and harmony. So across many cultures, we've always seen a very similar message. Real dialogue, real conversation isn't just about information exchange. It's about really transforming and changing the people within those conversations. And today, I really feel great because I had that with Carl. I've been following Carl's work for years, so it feels like I've been in a conversation with him for all those years. But today was a chance to sit deeper in that space with him and have a conversation around money. And he really reminded me about the importance of having meaningful conversations about money beyond budgets, but rather what our hopes, fears, and stories we tell ourselves around money. With his new book, Your Money, Carl's taken on a huge challenge that I know he's up for. He wants to spark 1 million money conversations through his book. And I really do think, I know for myself and the world, it needs that at this time. So based on today's conversation, I leave you with something to think about. When was the last time you had a deeply meaningful conversation about money? Not just like the numbers and how much you need, but the role money plays in your well-being, in your relationship, in your sense of meaning. Take that question and find someone who you really trust and have a conversation with them. See where it goes. Because it's often these questions that we wrestle with and we don't have quick answers, but it's usually these questions that shape who we become. And pre-order a copy of Carl's book so you can have a guide in sparking these fascinating conversations. Speaking about conversations, if you enjoyed today's, please subscribe to the show, hit the follow button. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, I would love if you could leave a quick review or rating. It really means something to us. If you like today's episode with Carl Richards, I think you would love episode number 8 with Dr. Brad Klontz, where we dive into the psychology of money and how understanding our own money story can really transform our lives. Until next time, take care.